Hello and welcome back to the Football Heritage podcast. I'm your host, Rory Bryce, and this week I'm joined by the administrator, founder and owner of the Georgian Footy X account, Luka Lagvilava. Luka, thank you very much for coming on. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's definitely a pleasure to speak about Georgian football and particularly like the old kind of miscellaneous stuff about it. So yeah, hopefully it will be a great show, little show.
Yeah, looking forward to this, man. Thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, there was a bit of a clash with some of the time differences when we were trying to arrange it, so
Yeah.
got it as early as possible. Now, for our listeners, if that doesn't give you the clue that you're looking for, we are of course going to be talking about FC Ameri Tbilisi, a Georgian football club who were around for about 7 years or so. And we're going to be diving into everything about them. But before we start, Luka, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first and the other types of things that you do?
Yeah, well, the footy kind of thing is something I started to do like just around 2 years ago. Mainly because there was not that big of a coverage about Georgian football, at least in English, on Twitter, and just decided why not. Again, got kind of close to a few people from the platform, got to know a few really nice people, and also got invited to a podcast a few times. So definitely a pleasure, and bringing just a little chunk of Georgian football to the world, at least the football world, is obviously a pleasure for me, and hopefully we'll get bigger, and more people will know about us, despite us being like a relatively small country. But slowly but surely, we're trying to work ourselves out, up the ranks of semi-decent teams in Europe, and hopefully in the next few qualifiers, we will be one of the teams competing for that qualifying spot, and eventually gain access to a maiden final stage of the big tournament, either the World Cup or the Euros. So yeah.
You can only hope. I mean, just from what you were saying there about different players going to different teams, you're kind of climbing your way up
Yeah.
through the echelons, if you like, of European football. You've got Kvaratskhelia at Napoli, numerous other players around the continent as well and elsewhere. And Georgia as a nation seems to be quite up and coming. I mean, the very first Scotland game I attended was against Georgia, and I think we've played you at least once every couple of years since. So
Yeah.
it's always been there up until the last game where things got a little bit tense, shall we
Dodgy,
say?
dodgy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But,
dodgy. Which is quite funny because I was watching it from home. My friend was there; he didn't get home until about 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's all a good laugh in the end. But we'll touch on that side of things later. First, we're going to cover FC Ameri Tbilisi, how they were founded, their very, very, very short life, their eventual demise. So they were founded in 2002 and based in Gldani, which is a suburb of Tbilisi, and they started life in the third tier of football in Georgia. So just off the bat, look out of curiosity, how many professional tiers in Georgia are there?
I'd say three and a half. Right now in Georgia, it's been the league has been restructured, and more teams have been added to lower divisions. We've got 5 tiers. The fifth one is a regional league, which was back in the day the third tier, in which FC Ameri was merged into Nochimo back in 2002, I think it was. But nowadays the fifth tier is more like a semi-pro league because there's not a single player on a contract. You can't really sign a player on a contract. They basically are on like per match bonuses and stuff like that. The fourth division is more professional, if that makes sense, because some of the players that are on specific contracts, other guys are either reserve team players or academy players. But then the third division, the second division, and the first division obviously is professional, and every single player is booked to a team, registered for a team, and they've got professional contracts just like in any other country. So to make a little reference, back in the day, the regional league was the third and fourth tier in Georgia. Nowadays, it's like the fifth division, which is more of a amateur slash semi-pro kind of tournament in Georgia. So yeah.
Okay, cheers. Well, that's quite good to know for context. Ameri went straight up, but then they struggled a bit in the second tier, along with a number of other clubs who restructured at this time too.
Back in the day, those kind of things when teams got withdrawn from the first few divisions was a common thing because, again, like financial stability was always an issue because the country's economics were a bit on like the slow turn at the time. So it might be something not familiar with more westward countries, but in Georgia that was a typical, let's say, trend, if that makes sense. And yeah, that's probably one of the main reasons why they stayed up despite being in the relegation zone for the second division outing in 2004.
Okay, well, the season after that, they then became champions, so that's quite a big jump. We've seen that before. They reached the top flight in 3 seasons. So, what's the story here? Was it the case that they had a good squad, a good manager, loads of money coming in, or?
I'd say a bit of everything, if that makes sense, but also some side factors, as I mentioned before, because at the time, keeping players in a single team for more than 6 to 12 months was always an issue, mainly because of, as I said before, financial issues. And Ameri, the district they're in is like the biggest one in Tbilisi. They're like a quarter of Tbilisi's population actually live there. So they got the support from the support of from the fans as well as some of the investors who put a bit of money in it, and that obviously helped them to get that extra bit of advantage over some teams in the, let's say, second or third division.
Mm.
And eventually, some of the players they had made the national team as well down the year. So obviously, it was a process which was made of a few little things which inevitably costed the team to get that automatic promotion, win the second division and get the automatic promotion, and then a few years down play some European football as well. So that's probably the reference point.
Right, okay, understood. Did you ever manage to see Ameri Tbilisi play live at all, Luka?
They first got in the tournament, but I remember the cup run. I was again quite little at the time, like 8 or 9 years old. But the two cup finals that played, they won them both. So I remember the
Mm.
last one that they played, and as I said before, yeah, with the amount of players they had, they were more of a pure attacking sides rather than just the one who's trying to stick like a system of keeping the control of the ball, staying at the back, something like that. So that share of goal differences and them scoring a lot of goals, which costed them winning quite a few games and a couple of trophies, was because of the attacking play style they were opted to. So yeah.
Yeah, well, you mentioned trophies there. Their first major trophy didn't come too later after that. It was the Georgian Cup, but obviously at this point, they were still quite a new team. But on that particular run, they were really, really blowing teams away, which is what jumped out to me. So, was it a case that this was just pragmatism from the team, or was the football just genuinely really, really good?
I mean, mainly because like we had this. Even to this day, there are some teams in the second or third division who actually push for higher places in the cup, like semi-final. We had a fourth division team making the final last season, which was a reserve team of a first division team, which kind of makes no sense. But yeah, they
Yeah,
were like a B
yeah,
team. Actually, the B team made the final, which
yeah,
was
yeah.
like the first time ever. So
The Swede.
some of the times that those kind of cup runs actually kind of fun. Like I remember Wigan made it to the final of the FA Cup, didn't they, in 2011 or 12? So although the on paper the team may not been as great or the players may not have been as great, like sometimes that cup runs are just a bit special, if that makes sense. And for Amory, apart from them actually doing well in the league, I guess they invested more into let's make the cup and win it, and then get that place in the European qualifiers.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd say like in terms of pragmatism, that was the route for them in the first few seasons because they weren't not quite close to winning the league. So I reckon the cup route and investing more in going through the finals or semi-finals in the cup was the route for them. So yeah, I'd say it's a mix of again like passion slash more determination in terms of choosing whether they push for league route to the Europe or the cup route to the Europe. So
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, no, no, I totally get that. It's, I suppose it's probably the not the shortcut, but the easier route for them, I guess. And of course, some of the teams that they played were also relatively new in the cup, so you know, I think one of the things that I took away from that was at this period of time in Georgian football, there was quite a lot of renewal, quite a lot of shake-ups, and maybe quite a bit of turbulence as well.
Um, that comes with a few things. I, I guess you could put politics in it in a certain way because we've had a change in government back in 2004, which, well, at the time it was a big jump from where the country was before 2004 and where it went because, as more of the post-Soviet countries, obviously, We had a few wars after in the 1990s. Economics were kind of bad. People left it like there were about 1.2 million people leaving Georgia at the time, and with a population of just 4 million, that's a huge figure. And obviously, there were not many people who were interested in investing, not only in sport but just in country and other businesses. After that little change, and after when the slightly more corrupt government went away and just new guys came in, there were loads of other interested of people who were willing to invest in club. You mentioned Gagra as the quarterfinal team. They were also established in 2004. And there are other teams like Lokomotiv Samtredia. They were restructured to just Samtredia in 2004 and five, I guess. So yeah, that was a common thing after some few political changes because people had more to invest in and more interest to invest in teams. And that was, yeah, I guess it's a relatively newer trend at the time, but it was kind of all right because Zestafoni as well, the team you mentioned, although they are in like third division now, they won the Georgian League a few times, played in Europe League playoffs a few times, won the cup as well a few times. So it was a decent experiment for many teams and many club owners, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I get you. Well, because they lifted the Georgian Cup, they actually qualified for the UEFA Cup as well. So within 4 years, they'd founded, made their way up two divisions, won the Georgian Cup, and now they're playing in Europe. And we'll come back to that because I wanted to ask, first of all, with the creation of the Conference League now, do you think it will give more Georgian clubs a chance to actually play European football again?
Definitely because well, we've struggled severely to make the group stages since 2004. I mean, the last appearance of a Georgian team was back in 2004, which when Dynamo Tbilisi qualified for the UEFA Cup. But at the time, it was like a different format. It was like five teams in a group. We had Newcastle, Sochaux from France, Pagnonis, and one other team I can't really remember that. And yeah, it was a different kind of tournament. But even today, I guess that's definitely a route for our teams to make it, and for smaller nations, if that kind of makes sense, because we've got teams from, again, no disrespect to any nation, to any league, but we've got teams from like Armenia, Iceland made it to the group stages this season. Faroe Islands, Klaksvik in an amazing run of fixtures for them, made the tournament. Bosnia made the tournament. Gibraltar, Lincoln, Red Imps made the group stages 2 years ago. So definitely, I guess it should be the route because again, the financial aid you get from qualifying, which is about 4.2 million euros, with which you can easily build a team to again get to the group stages the next season, if you ask me, and have a bit of money to spend in other departments. So unfortunately, we've struggled, but that comes down to many factors, and if something, we'll probably cover those things in.
Yeah, well, they managed to progress through the first tie, but then went out to Hertha Berlin, albeit narrowly, which, in that context and in isolation is a fantastic result. They drew with them at home in Georgia, which is a great effort, and then only get narrowly beat by them 1-0 at the Olympia Stadion or wherever Hertha were playing at that time. So, yeah, I mean, by all accounts, though they get put out, magnificent result.
Yeah, I mean, again, like for a team who was established 5 years before a team from the Bundesliga, that's definitely not an achievement, but that's definitely something to remember and trace back to for maybe years to come by former FC Ameri players and coaches. So yeah, definitely, it was a huge thing at the time.
Well, they also won the Georgian Super Cup that year too, so the trophy cabinet was certainly getting more full. They also retained the Georgian Cup that year as well, which had a bit of a format change in it, I believe. They managed to navigate it fine. I mean, from what I read, it was sort of similar to how the League Cup in Scotland is structured at the beginning, where you kind of have these league phases. So something along those lines. Anyway, if listeners, if you want to know more, then you can go and have a look at it yourself. But they navigated that fine for the most part. They met another newly established club in the final called Zestafoni, who they would meet a number of times throughout their existence, really. And a wee rivalry kind of developed with them, I suppose. Would that be fair to say?
I guess yes, because of the fact that they were like newly established, so everyone wanted to push for better places and trophies. So because they battled each other out for two consecutive seasons, with Ameri winning both cup finals in consecutive years, I guess that the rivalry was quite a thing. But again, because Ameri didn't last all that long, as much as Estefano did, it kind of died down a bit in like say 4 years, 3 to 4 years.
Right, okay, I've got you. Makes sense. Yeah, so they've become a bit of a cup team, I think it would be fair to say, and that got them passage into the UEFA Cup yet again, but the run was cut short earlier after they lost to Polish opposition. So they went back to domestic duty again, but then they made it to another cup final, once again against Estefoni.
Again, one thing I had to know out is the fact that it was in the game was in Tbilisi at the Dinamo Arena, called the Boris Bajan Arena, and with Zestaponi being a team like 4 hours away from Tbilisi, the stadium was half full at the time, which was a decent figure to fill around like 27,000 people to watch the game. So it was definitely a decent figure for a cup final in Tbilisi, in which Dinamo Tbilisi did not play. So yeah, it was a big thing, and Zestaponi walked away with a 2-1 victory of Ameri.
Yep, that's right, you're spot on. So they didn't manage to retain the cup, sadly, and then next season the club withdrew from the league and dissolved, citing financial issues, which was really, really sudden and unexpected to me, considering they just won 2 cups and played in Europe twice. So, what's the script here? What happened?
Just typical mismanaging, I guess. They did sell a few good players, mainly the top scorer Tatanashvili to Czech side. Victoria Plzen, I think it was for a decent amount of money, but I guess mainly because, as I mentioned before, the disability to maintain consistency both in finance, funding, and obtaining some few players, and that played its part, and eventually costed the FC Ameri to starts to die down and then eventually kind of fall.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, it just seems to me such a shame given how strong they were becoming, really. And a shame for the fans who'd come along to see them for the ride as well, because at the end of the day, it really seemed like that they had something good going for them in Gldani. I mean, had they managed to grow their fan base at all since they founded?
Yeah, because of the fact that it was inside the biggest district, which even today, like FC Gldani, there's a team called FC Gldani, which is more of a youth academy. They got like, I'd say, around 12, 11 or 12 age groups, and they're all stacked like every single game. Even like under 11, under 10 games, they're like at least 100 people. Obviously, parents and well, kids talking about stuff like this. The backing people from there's like a big community in Gldani, in the district of Gldani. And yeah, it was a big thing, but yeah, it didn't quite last long, and even it's unfortunate for me the way I see it, because if there's like a unit um, inside a capital city which is not connected to Dinamo Tbilisi, it's always nice to have a competitor inside the town and then around the country. But it didn't quite last long, and as we will discuss it in next couple of minutes, it ended up in FC Gldani being short in funding and then eventually holding. So yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, Luca, did the war that was ongoing in Georgia at the time have
Yeah.
anything to do with the death of the clubs or any other clubs?
I'd say so. I'd say so because again the instability, unstable state of things. Everyone was scared. No one knew what to do, and that definitely made a few people to stop their business in Georgia. Again, like as us being unfortunately connected to Russia more than I think we should. Many people who got a bit of money even today are because they made some business in Russia, and their funding was depending on Russia at the time. So after the war, obviously some um, funding was cut short. Some people either just flee to some other countries like Ukraine or Belarus, or maybe even westwards like France or Germany, and they decided not to do any business in Georgia. And yeah, that definitely played a part in inevitably for a few, not only FC Ameri. And yeah, that's probably the story, like a chunk of reasoning for why FC Ameri and the teams got folded around that post-war slash 2010 period. So yeah.
Has there ever been an attempt to bring them back? Because, as I said, by the sounds of it, they've become pretty popular within Gldani and quite a good representative club for the people living there.
I think I was in 2011. They tried to do a bit of maintenance work around the stadium, and there were talks that a local investor might try to get a bit of money into the team, and Firstly, I mean, the thing is, they had a youth academy for years after they got folded. There were a ton of players in youth Georgian youth international squad from FC Ameri's academy, but yeah, that project didn't quite last long again, and the youth academy got shut down or bought out by other team, FC Sabatala, who are now playing top Georgian division, and the project of rebranding slash restructuring the team eventually went basically nowhere. And the effort in 2000, I think it was 2011, if I'm not mistaken, that lasted for a few months, and then no one never heard anything new about whether they'd be coming back or not. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it just seems such a shame. It sounds like they were building something really, really positive within the community, and the fans were responding to it as well. And how is football in Georgia now? Just off the back of what we've discussed, has it stabilised any?
Um, well, as it is in the past, well, since whenever Georgian football started to exist, Dinamo Tbilisi, which is like the biggest club in Tbilisi and in Georgia, like 19-time champions, the only team in Georgia who made the group stages after the post-Soviet era, and the only team that won a European silverware in 1981. Dinamo Tbilisi won the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup, beating Carl Zeiss Jena from Germany to one. Yeah, Dinamo Tbilisi, that's one. And Dinamo Batumi, which is a seaside city in Batumi. They are the two main say players, and apart from them, two or three more teams tried to push them. Torpedo Kutaisi, one of them, Dila Gori the second, and Sabtal the third. But just mainly because of the difference in well, in Dinamo Tbilisi's case, they've got an amazing academy which is responsible for 95% of players that are playing in Georgian national team. Mainly the guy who plays for Napoli plays as well. So yeah, they've got the luxury of having new youngsters coming in every single summer or winter. So that definitely helps them to at least stay afloat at the top, like top two teams. And Dino Batumi, who never really had that big of a success. They only got the first championship in 2021, although they won the Georgian Cup a few times. They only won the Georgian championship once. But yeah, they became a bit viral slash relevant because they had a new stadium built, which is actually a beautiful one. I'd recommend you guys have a look at it in 2021 as well. And because of that stadium and that atmosphere, fan culture is also kind of big in between me. They became one of the big teams in Georgia. And they're like the biggest team. It's probably Torpedo Kutaisi, which is the second most crowned Georgian champion. But they had a bit issues financially inside the past 5 years. But fortunately for them, they got a bit of momentum now. They got decent funding and decent investment, and their stadium has been rebuilt, not rebuilt, maintenance, and that will probably help them to push for higher places and push for a better future inside the next decade or so, maybe even more. So yeah.
Okay, so if you don't mind me asking, then who's your derby? Then what's the derby match or the big derby match that's in Georgia?
Okay, the historic derby, which ends up typically in fighting and riots and stuff, is Dinamo Tbilisi versus Torpedo Kutaisi. There were like documentary movies about that derby because of how the city of Kutaisi and Tbilisi is all like competing between each other, not only football wise, but just people from Tbilisi and people from Kutaisi tend to kind of have a shout at each other. But yeah, historically, as I said before, the two most successful Georgian teams are Torpedo Kutaisi and Dinamo Tbilisi, but mainly because Dinamo Batumi have been on the rise for the past 3, 4 seasons. They are the biggest pushers of Dinamo Tbilisi this past few years. Um, and I'd say those Dinamo Tbilisi versus Dinamo Batumi, that's one. And more historic, I'd say Dinamo Tbilisi versus Torpedo Kutaisi. Yeah.
I mean, just for our listeners and myself, Luca, where is it that we can actually watch Georgian football? Is there any streaming services? Is there any that you
Yeah, they're free on YouTube. So
Oh, amazing.
every single match day of the top division is free to watch without VPN, I think, as well. So if there's any one of you trying to pop in and watch a game, you're kind of free to go. And well, I'll give you a game you'd probably may enjoy. Have a look at the schedule because obviously there's the international break. On the 16th of September is actually the classic Dinamo Tbilisi versus Torpedo Kutaisi derby. So
So is that just
yeah,
on the Georgian FA YouTube channel?
it's Eromnuli Liga I'm going to link you guys after this.
Yeah, perfect. No,
Yeah,
that's amazing, man. Thanks very much.
yeah, it's free to watch. So 5 p.m. GMT. I think you guys should be slightly available at the time. So yeah, it will be a relatively bigger game in terms of the way those two teams are and the history behind those two teams. So yeah, it should be a decent game.
Yeah, definitely. It's yeah, no, I'll keep an eye out for that, and I'll see if I can fire up the YouTube and see what I can find. So here's the real question, I suppose: who are you going to be backing in the upcoming derby?
I support Dinamo Tbilisi. It is a hometown country for me, a hometown club for me. And first game I've ever been to was actually the last time Dinamo got qualified for UEFA Cup in 2004. I was 5 years old at the time, so definitely don't really remember much of the game, but I remember slight emotions after it with my family members and my father and my uncles and stuff like that. So yeah.
Nice one. Yeah, there's a pretty good feeling around the national team right now as well. Obviously, you're in a group with Scotland, which has been quite funny recently, given the torrential rain and yeah, saw you interacting, shall we say, with a lot of Scottish fans on Twitter, which was a really good read. But I mean, outside of that, how are you feeling about the national team just now, generally?
Well, it's a tough group from top to bottom. I mean, even the so-called the weakest pot five team, which was Cyprus, which is not a gift to it. But again, I do believe we've probably got one of the toughest groups to play in because they are the groups like I think Group H is relatively wide open. There's like Kazakhstan, Denmark, Slovenia, Finland, Montenegro, and Gibraltar. I think I'm not convinced if I'm correct about that, but still. So yeah, it's been tough from day one. Obviously, we had to face Norway in April, and everyone hoped that we might have won, especially with our Haaland, but we drew 1-1. And after that, we won against Cyprus and lost against Scotland in a emphatic water polo session. I like, and yeah, I mean it's a tough group, but there's still hope that we might push for the second place because, well, as I mentioned before, Scotland's got 4 wins out of 4. They're 8 points clear at the top. Yeah, we're second with 1 game to spare, but still have to play against Spain and Norway, which 2 teams which will definitely have to compete for the second, maybe even for the first spot. But I guess Scotland will probably walk away with topping the group. The game against Spain might decide everything for us. Not saying that we're expecting to win it because you can't really expect to win against Spain, but it will yeah it will be a tough task when if we manage to secure maybe 4 points out of the next 2 games, we should be set for a dramatic ending to our qualifying campaign in October and November. Hopefully, it will be the case for us to push for that second spot and maybe qualify for the Euros. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can only really take a game at a time. It is a very, very difficult group. I mean, what would it mean to you for Georgia to qualify for the Euros?
Huge, because as I said before, we've never been to a group stage of a big tournament. We've been close back in 2020 when we faced North Macedonia in the Nations League final. But fortunately, it was one of the more upsetting things was that half of our team got COVID. But apart from that, we were to play in Tbilisi. The final was held in Tbilisi, but fans weren't allowed to enter the stadium. Although we got the clearance from UEFA, the government did not allow supporters to enter the stadium to buy tickets, which was harsh and devastating. And we lost 1-0 to Macedonia. Fair play to them, and they made somewhat decent showing at the Euros as well. But yeah, that I guess that would have been the biggest achievement, not only sporting wise, but in general in Georgian history. I may be biased because I support football, but for like a smaller nation, those things do really matter. If we had made the Euros back in the day, and if we make the Euros or the World Cup in the coming next few years, it will obviously be one of the biggest achievements of the country as a whole. So.
Oh yeah, without doubt. And I suppose especially with the expanded World Cup format, you'll be hoping to get there as well. And really, there's only one man that will be aiming to take you there, and that's Kvaratskhelia, isn't it? He's going to be the man to lead you guys there, as it seems at the moment, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. He's been carrying us for the past 3 years, I'd say so. But Apart from that, at the time we were quite only dependent on him. We still are in a certain way because he's got that X factor in him. He can take a man or two off the dribble, and he can execute a pass or a shot that will inevitably end up as a goal. But the team as a whole came into a different kind of direction, and by that I mean we had players who used to play for. We had like six players in the Premier League back in the day, like five or six in the Bundesliga, a few in Italy, who were regular in their teams. I guess Rory might be familiar with Shota Arvelade, who used to play for Rangers back
Yeah.
in the day. But despite that, that team didn't really come together as a group, as a unit. Uh, and after the mid 2000s, the transitioning period between those times and let's say 2017, that 10-year gap was huge because it was so hard for our players to get bigger moves to move to bigger clubs. And this summer has been amazing for us because we had tons of players living for Italy. We had like three guys that went to Serie A and Serie B. A few guys went to well, one of the guys went to Championship in England. A few guys went to France, Germany, so on and so forth. So definitely the direction the football's going is way better than what it was say 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. But apart from that, the discipline, the uh, willingness of sticking together or sticking together as a team has been probably at its highest inside this past couple of decades, which I guess that's a main factor for every single smaller nation to make that push and to qualify for a tournament. Same with us, maybe like North Macedonia, as I mentioned before, Albania, who made the Euros in 2016. Iceland have been amazing for a few tournaments. Small nation, but that little unity and being like a unit, like strong unit that helped them to make the group stages and well eventually go through the group stages as they beat England in the quarterfinals of the Euro. Yeah, it was the one round of 16. And yeah, I mean, I guess the positives are those that the team has come together as a strong group of players who are willing to play together to be a unit. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. It's not enough to be a great player. You have to be a cohesive unit on the pitch as well, which I think is what we've seen more from Scotland in this qualifying run as well. We just look a lot more well drilled, and don't get me wrong, I think there has been an element of luck in there as well. But I'm feeling pretty positive going into the campaign, and yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. It's as I said, it's just not enough to be a player. You have to be cohesive and work as a well drilled unit on the pitch. Sorry, but just to go back to club football quickly for a bit, do you think any Georgian clubs will make it to the European group stages anytime soon?
Um, Not quite, to be fair. I'd say the main objective is to at least make the group stages because coming from a country who has got like the lower country coefficient, it's always hard to push for that first or second spot. Again, it depends on the group you're in and how lucky you get with a draw, but I'd say the main objective is to make the group because typically players here don't really stay all that long. Like Kvaratskhelia, who was a player for Dinamo Tbilisi, he only played like 4 games for the team. Eventually got sold and so moved on, and then later on he moved to Napoli. But that's an issue if there's a talented player in Georgia. Not long that he stayed in the country, but then eventually gets sold. So that financial, I guess, instability plays its part, and for chairmen and the owners who know that, oh, if I sell this player, I'm going to get not a crazy amount for European football, but like a million and a half is huge in Georgia, and for smaller countries like us. And yeah, I guess that's probably one of the main points of why our teams aren't really able to build like a solid core players, a solid core team who could A, push for group stages and B, then push for going through the knockout stages of Europa League, Conference League, or the Champions League as well. But yeah, I guess in my eyes, qualifying for group stages is the main objective for every single team in our league.
I mean, as well, there's a lot of talent from Georgia that's currently on the move. A lot of young players going to big
Yeah.
teams across Europe as well. I actually noticed this is a bit of a tangent just before we came on that Georgi Moistrapashvili, hope I've pronounced that right,
Yeah,
has
yeah,
just moved to SK Beveren. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, there's a lot of Georgian talent going to other big countries across Europe. Obviously, that's good for the national team, and it can be good for the national team. Do you think it's important for clubs within Georgia to either keep their talent and keep their players there, or to find ways to bring talent from other leagues in, whether that be guys who are maybe getting a bit older and looking somewhere to end their
yeah.
career, or just otherwise? What's your thoughts on that?
Again, depends on players, to be fair, because every single player needs a bit of environment around him. I guess there are some players who, with Quara in this case, everyone knew that he would have played amazing football when he was like 18. Him compared to other guys who are talented, but not as talented as him and haven't got that like generational talent label on them. I guess like having them for as much as possible for them not to stop developing, but having someone as a partner for them, maybe a foreigner with decent experience who will teach them how to be and how to play more of a European football. That's probably the way I see it because if you want to compete, like again, as I mentioned before, with smaller nations, every single most of the countries who made the group stages had a plethora of foreign players in the teams, with obviously domestic players, and that's I'm fine with that. Not saying that you should only have 23 Georgian players in your team and you should qualify for it because again with the country being quite small, you don't really have the resource and like luxury of all the players being Champions League slash Europa League slash Conference League worthy, Conference League quality. So to trying to find that balance of some local youth players slash with foreign talent, with a bit more experience, with a bit more edge, that's probably the route for. If I ever was in charge of a team, I'd probably went that way, having a mix of good foreign players with some talented-ish Georgian players who a will help the team to push the group stages, which will inevitably result in better marketing. Those players are going to be more teams are going to be aware of those players, and they will be sold for more money. In return, like that's a win-win for everyone, for the club, for the player, for the league in general, and that will entice other players to come in the league and use this league as a bridge and as a jump to a stronger league. And hopefully that will be a case because, as I mentioned before, like with Clara moving to Napoli, that opened up that little bridge to Europe for us, and we've seen like five other guys making the Italian football pyramid top two divisions, and hopefully other people will push for it and try to find a route from Georgia to European football, but that will benefit Georgian football only. I guess that's the way I see it, at least. So, yeah, I guess building a team around foreign and local talent is the route for teams in Georgia and leagues like us.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. It's fantastic. I love it. I mean, there's sort of been a couple of similar things in Scotland, I guess, in the SPFL. For some reason, Serie A teams in Serie A and Serie B are buying a lot of Scottish players at the moment, which is quite interesting. But also, there's a bit of a problem with some. Actually, it's mainly Celtic and Rangers. There's a problem with their youth academies at the moment because their players can't get the youth players coming through the ranks just can't get a game whatsoever.
Yeah,
Celtic have just lost out on who looks to be a generational talent in Ben Doak, who went to Liverpool. And by all accounts, whenever he's played, he's absolutely tearing it up. And he's only 17, 18. No doubt he's going to be a great player if he continues his development. We're also about to lose another talent, not to the same level as Ben Doak, but Rocco Vata. By
yeah,
all
I know. Yeah,
tipped for quite a big future, but now he's potentially away, and it's because the players just can't get a game. Whereas some of the other clubs in the league, Motherwell, have a fantastic academy. They're bringing a lot of good players through at the moment as well. So I think you're right. It's good to keep a balance. I personally think there should be rules within the SPFL that each team has to include a set amount of under
yeah, fair. Definitely, I agree. I agree.
squad. I think that's the only way of fixing it. But no, other than that, I think you're absolutely spot on.
We had the same kind of talk with a few of our friends. Um, country did this player pie in here, but bringing in a player from Sweden, the vast difference in culture, in the way the countries are set up in the league, that will obviously play a part. He could have like an amazing resume, but he cannot play in Georgia. just not because he's a bad player, just because he
Yeah.
can't play in the league like this. And we had like with Dinamo Tbilisi in the early 2010s, they had like big influx of cash. Like players were coming in from La Liga. We had like players on like $45,000 contracts per month, which is compared to what it is now was a huge amount. But some players just could not just for the league. That was the issue. Although the players were playing for Levante, Valencia, Athletic Bilbao, Betis, and the resume sounded pretty nicely. Can't play in the league like this. And obviously, the resume is one, but the actual reality of where your league is at and where the social standards of the league is kind of different. You have to be more, let's say, smart.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, and it's like you say, there's other factors in there as well, isn't there? I think the COVID season really brought that home for a lot of people, and really brought a lot of those issues to the fore. I mean, just for example, I do have one player in mind when it comes to this, but imagine moving from like Greece to Scotland during COVID. The weather's shit. You can't go outside. You've not been able to bring your family with you, and you're, I don't know, you're playing for like Hamilton or something like that. You're going to be having an awful time, aren't you? So there's so many other factors that come into a player settling in a nation, and I can imagine, I mean, Scotland can be pretty difficult for a lot of players to settle in, and I can imagine it's probably the same for Georgia as well. Are there any other Georgian players coming through at home or on the continent right now?
I'd say not in Georgia right now, but because loads of players have went to leagues. Ajax signed Mikhail Tadze from FC Metz from French Ligue 1. He's probably, well, I hope he'll be the top scorer of Georgia national team in a few years. He's got like an amazing record with FC Metz. He's got like 37 goals and 7 assists in 44 games, something like that. So
Nice.
some video game numbers, yeah. We got a few more players like Sazonov, who's been born in Russia, has got a Russian father, but chose to represent Georgia. Now went to Torino as a centre back. A few teams wanted him from English Championship as well, but they decided to stick with a league which would develop his abilities a bit more. Mamadashvili, a goalkeeper, plays for Valencia, was on the verge of moving to Bayern Munich this summer, but they decided to opt out of buying him for like 20 million and bought the Israeli goalkeeper Daniel Peretz for like 5 or 6 million, which I guess that's the way Bayern might do their business. And yeah, I'd say that those players are the top 3, 4 players who we should be looking out, watching out on, and other guys obviously making the jump in the national team because we start to get younger and younger every single season. All the new players are coming in, and yeah.
Yeah, no, of course, I totally get what you mean. Yeah, no, look, thank you very much for joining me on this episode tonight. I think that'll do us for now. We've managed to cover everything that I certainly wanted to in terms of Ameri Tbilisi, and hopefully you have as well in terms of telling our listeners a little bit more about football in Georgia as well. So thank you very much for joining me once again. Of course, all of our listeners, thank you very much for tuning in for this episode. If there's a topic that you want us to cover that's related to football history or heritage, then please do get in touch. It can be anything from, as I said, history, heritage, or identity, place, community, lost clubs, former grounds, or even if there's just a story that you want to tell us, then you can come and have a chat with us and we'll see if it's something that we can fit on the podcast or on the website. You can DM us on X, that's @_footyheritage, or you can email us at hello@footballheritage.co.uk. Even if it's something you don't think we'll be able to do, please just have a conversation with us and we'll see what we're able to do with it, because you never know, heritage and history can crop up in all sorts of different places. But outside of that, we're more than happy to have a chat with people about football and football history regardless. Of course, our website is footballheritage.co.uk. That's where all of our written content lives. Please go and have a read of some of the fantastic written content that's going up there from our contributors. You certainly won't be disappointed. But for now, look up, say goodbye.
Bye bye.
And it's goodbye from me as well. We'll see you all again next week. Goodbye.